Now, in a world dominated by AI, human connection has never been more important. In today's episode, we're going to explore what AI can't replace and how to infuse connection into your leadership style.
Welcome to Fortify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Today, we're joined by Julie Lee, a speaker and leadership expert on human connection in the workplace. Now, while AI continues to revolutionize how we work, Julie's here to remind us of some things that we can do that technology simply can't replace, like the power of authentic connection. Julie, welcome to Fortify Live. We're live right now on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and a few other places. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I want to start out by first asking, why is this your topic? What made this a passion of yours?
Yeah, great question. To put it hopefully semi-short and simply, I had a experience when I was 21 years old in a job when my mental health completely fell apart under some really toxic leadership. And I had a different leader that was able to step in and humanize the situation and make me feel very seen as an individual, not just as an employee. And that experience, being under that kind of connective leadership, quite frankly, it saved my life and it transformed my career. And so from there, I really developed a podcast called ICU. And then that led to a book contract, ICU, How Compassion and Connection Save Lives. And now I go and I keynote and train leaders of exactly how to do that, how to humanize the workplace, how to infuse human connection. So people, not just to improve their mental health, which is a huge topic right now, but also to help elevate their employees' performance.
Well, every organization I work with is a keynote speaker, and I ask them what the top 3 challenges are. It always comes down to staffing, right? How do we find good people? How do we retain them? How do we engage them? And I think right now, especially with technology and just the dynamics of the culture and the workforce, there's a lot of challenges. And I think a lot of people are leaning, when everybody tries to go high tech, I always say you should go high touch. But you really have a lot of experience in that background. So before we talk about the solutions, what are some of the challenges you see? How does the human connection or the lack of the human connection impact organizations?
I don't see AI as a problem. I guess I just want to say that first off, because AI can do incredible things. I see it as a tool, just like anything else. But there is a lot of fear-based conversations happening around AI. I think AI is kind of the sexy new thing that everyone's excited about. Interestingly enough, last week I was sitting with a bunch of executives around a round table in preparation for a conference we're all speaking at, the Utah Business Forward Conference. And I was listening to these different executives from big companies like Young Living and IHC talk about how they're trying to implement AI. And there was a lot of the same pattern happening in these companies, one of which is that people are really excited to use AI, but they don't even necessarily often know what they're using it for. They're not always clear on what the objective is to use the AI. They're not using it specifically for certain tasks. They're just excited. Like, AI is going to change us. We're going to implement AI, but they don't have a thought out plan to use it for what it's really for. And that's, I think, one of the biggest concerns is people overusing it in ways that actually aren't going to help their company, because it is replacing that human touch that is so necessary. And so I think AI isn't a problem. It's just using it very smartly, being really clear about what it's used for and how it can help, because hopefully it'll only amplify our ability to have more space, more room to focus on the human connection as we get AI systems in place.
Yeah, I agree. When I work with brands, I talk about the pitfalls. And one of the pitfalls organizations have is they don't have an acceptable use policy. They don't have clear communication channels. They don't have a committee dedicated to wins and losses. And they don't have structure to make sure that if they're going to implement, regardless of the tool, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot, right. And now ChatGPT has another new version that just came out. And so this technology is evolving so quickly. And I think that, for me, I love it where it can help me write more tactful communication, because I'm a pretty direct person. Those of you that are subscribers that watch me, either have seen me speak or watched the previous episode, I'm real direct. And while I think I know a lot, I also am very clear that there's a lot I don't know. And the more that I learn, the more I know I don't know. And so, I like technology to help solve a specific thing. But when it comes down to that human connection, I think it's really important for organizations, especially while everybody switches to technology. So what what are some things that you recommend or that you do or that you see when you're working with teams or leaders to help them make sure they're not missing the human connection?
Generally really focusing on the things that AI can't replace, which a lot of it, I mean, has to do with human relationships, which is so much of brand building, as you talk about. Really these ideas of the things it can't replace. It can't replace that face-to-face contact, obviously, and it can't replace critical thinking, nuanced thinking in certain situations. So AI is great for replacing, for making automated, for making monotonous work automated so that you have more room to talk face to face with people. But really, I mean, as we think about it, people usually are most likely to buy because of what? Because of referrals, right? Like that's going to be the human interaction. We talk a lot about this idea of in our relationships, if we want to feel completely connected, people need to feel three things: seen, appreciated, and trusted. So feeling seen as a human individual, I always talk about this idea that when you see me, I want to follow you. That was my own personal experience, right? That saved my life is I had this woman that stepped in and that saw me. And even though my mental health was a mess and I wanted to quit, because she humanized the situation and made it more important that I get healthy than even do a good job, all of a sudden I performed at a higher level. When you see me, I want to follow you. We talk about making people feel appreciated. Gratitude begets momentum. Now, I can think of several ways that AI could help us more quickly and a more automated, more sufficiently make sure that we're keeping track of making people feel appreciated. But once again, without a human directing how that works, it's not going to be effective. So do I think that AI can help our relationships? Absolutely, but it's got to have the human touch with it, the human directing it very specifically of exactly what you want it to do for you. The last pillar we talk a lot about is making people feel trusted. This is the one that I think I struggle the most seeing how AI can benefit much.
Right.
And jury's out. I reserve the right to change my mind anytime. But so much of trust there's a piece of vulnerability there, of human vulnerability. And what I often talk to leaders about is this idea of not just being able to give, but to receive from their people. That's a higher level of trust that I think a lot of us struggle to implement in our relationships. We're often quick to give, to serve, to give advice, to give orders, whatever it is. It's often hard to receive, to ask for help, to, especially sometimes for people that we feel like I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. I'm above you. I'm supposed to always have the answers. But to ask for their help and receive that humbly, it does incredible things for a level of trust. Can I share a quick example
Sure,
of that?
please go for it.
So this is going to be outside of a work situation, but I just think it hits the nail on the head. It's one that I use in my book, and it's that I was going to a speaking gig and I had a neighbor watch my two little kids at the time. And on the way home, when I got there, I remember I'm kneeling down and I'm tying my little girl's shoe. And I just say to my neighbor, hey, I'd love to return the favor sometime. Like, I'd love to take your kids off your hands so you can go, you can go work, you can go get a pedicure, you can go work out, whatever it is. And I remember so clearly the words she said to me, which she's looking down at me. So maybe picture you're me. I'm kneeling down in this submissive position. She looks down at me. She said, I could never let you do that. I wouldn't want to be a burden. And if we think about that, what's the message sent there? I've just asked her for help. I've allowed her to help me. And now she won't let me help her because she couldn't be seen as a burden. Now, like, Ford, did I ever ask her for help again?
Right. Of course not.
Of course not. So often, I mean, in our roles as leaders, it's like we might say, yeah, it's okay for you to take vacation days. It's okay for you to take time off. Like, do it for your mental health, spend time with your family. But if we don't do it for ourselves, that sends a really clear message. I remember a job I was in where there was awards given out at the end of the year for never missing a day of work and never taking a vacation day. That sends a really clear message.
I have that award right back here.
Do you? Well, congratulations. But it sends a clear message, right? Not that that's bad, but if we say, hey, here's an EAP program to help you with your mental health. Here, take vacations with your families, take some time off during not busy season. And then we don't do it ourselves, or we don't ask for help, if we're not willing to practice what we preach, it really hurts the trust in the relationship and can create a lot of fear in a job, which, like you said, so much of what you see as well is keeping happy staff, the employee retention. And I mean, there's so many studies about this, but people feeling safe at work, they're just more willing to. It doesn't mean we don't have boundaries, it doesn't mean we don't have expectations, but when people feel seen, they want to follow you, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, I've had 17 different companies. I've had hundreds of employees. And as a business owner, and there's all different types of styles. My style has always been kind of a driver. I want to produce results, take care of the client. I mean, we have a 3-part system. We want happy clients. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of our clients, whether that's through my digital marketing agency or as a keynote speaker or consultant. We want a happy bank account. We want to make sure that we're charging a fair wage, value for value, which is profitable. And we want a happy team. And so it's a balance of the happy team, happy bank account, and happy clients. And so whenever we go too far in one zone, now when it came to happy team, for a while I really struggled with that, because it was like, okay, I need to, everybody was telling me, you need to reward your employees, you need to do this. And I kept saying, well, I want them to be intrinsically motivated. I want them to perform. And right now, I've got a lot of virtual staff that I use, and I've got it dialed in because I've got good people. But there was a period of time, and I think it still happens, where it's a trust issue, where, if we're supposed to be on a meeting at 8:30 and someone's late to the meeting, or someone's late with a report or taking care of a client, but at the same time, I know that they work off hours. So my staff is all salaried, so it's different. And so I've tried to work on a culture of building trust, building communication, creating conditions of satisfaction. I've never been good at consequences. When someone doesn't do something, that we have a really clear understanding of, okay, they messed up. It's me. It's usually, a large session of communication. I'll just leave it like that if my team listens and they watch these episodes, so they'll know what I'm talking about. But so my question to you as an expert is this: how can a business leader that's focused on performance and drive, who wants to excel, who's an entrepreneur, who always wants to better their best, and keep going without burning out your staff, right? So what are some ways that a leader like me can do? So we do lunch and learns, we do team activities. We do have a pretty flexible work schedule where they can put in Slack or Teams, hey, I'm going to be gone for a dentist or haircut, or I need a mental health day. So that part I'm pretty good at, but I'm just curious, as an expert in leadership, what you found in working with organizations where the leader wants performance and the team wants freedom and flexibility, and sometimes is intrinsically motivated to work. So I'm just curious. I know that's a lot to unpack, but we'll see how you
I love it.
Do that. Yep.
Question for you. Did you say they're sometimes intrinsically motivated, or they're not?
The team I have now is intrinsically motivated, but when I had bigger staff, it was a challenge. You'd hire someone. I don't bash on millennials. My team is millennial, so I want to be very careful there.
Totally.
But there were times where I did hire like a web developer for my agency who watched YouTube videos all day on the second monitor. And I'm like, you can't leave YouTube videos up playing. And they're like, well, it doesn't affect my work. And then I had another guy who listened to sports talk radio. He was my copywriter. How is he supposed to write copy when he's halfway disconnected? So to me, those were two challenges where I felt they were competent. They had skills, but the environment they didn't produce. And I ended up letting both of them go after a while because it became too much tension.
So they didn't produce. They didn't produce enough.
They had the skill sets, but they didn't produce consistently. They had the capability. So my team has always been taught, or my leaders have always said, train to standard, coach to standard, hold them accountable, or free them up for new opportunities. So that's kind of the plan.
I don't know. To me, it seems like you're nailing on the head there. Like all the things you're saying you're doing are fantastic. And that's the thing. it's interesting, once again, talking at this roundtable with these different executives in successful Utah businesses was fascinating. We talked about this idea how the old badge of honor used to be, I work 90 hours a week to get where I am. Right. Like I grind and I worked for what I got. And there is a new generation where it's like, dude, I only worked 20 hours this week and I crushed it. Like this is the new life. And it's interesting how it can swing that far, because I don't think either of those are ideal, to be honest. And one of the executives at IHC, she made an interesting comment where she's like, well, then they don't have enough work. If they're crushing it in 20 hours work, that was kind of my thought with your guys. That's what was ringing in my head when you were talking about the YouTube. And I'm like, do they not have enough work?
Oh, they had enough work. They just came out of a culture where everybody got a trophy and they didn't have to work. They never were held accountable. And all of a sudden they're in the workforce and there's rules and guideline and accountability, and they struggled. And so to me, I mean, it was kind of like tough love, like, okay, too bad, you know, and, you know, move on.
Well, maybe there could be some slight adjustment. However, but that's the thing though, is that's not what seeing people is about. Like seeing people isn't letting them get away with like not being their best selves. Like I think about, so I think a really good example of this is the CEO of Gap. His name is Nate Randall. And have you met Nate? Are you familiar with him?
No, but I know
and what
name,
he does.
Yeah.
I listened to him speak at the same conference I'm going to speak at in a couple months in November at the Utah Business Forward Conference. And something that he said that has always stuck with me, because I feel like he nailed it on the head. He treats his employees very well. But Gab is known for being a great place to work. If you look at reviews and things, they do super well. They win all sorts of awards. I think it's fascinating what he said. And this is what he said. I don't ever call my employees I don't ever call them my employees. I say they're my people. Because I work with my people. They're my people. I work for my people. They're my people.
That's a great takeaway today for the episode. That's great.
But don't leave it there. And then he says, but I never call them my family.
Okay, because a lot of franchise brands do call them family.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes, and I've heard that so much. And I feel like it's kind of hitting on the subject you're talking about is they're not employees, they're humans, right? I see them. But my family gets the best of me when I go home. That's the goals that they get. I don't fire my family. I need to be able to fire people. And he talked about how he said, if I notice someone that is being toxic in the environment, and people may agree or disagree with this, and I'm not going to say which is wrong or right, but he's like, I don't even give them a warning. They're gone. Like they're gone. If they're being unkind, if they're mistreating people, if they're not adhering to things we're asking them to do, if they're pushing back, they're gone. And he's known as like one of the kindest CEOs there are, but man, that guy is boundaried. And I think he's a fantastic, because really, like, if we look at compassion, okay, so my book, I See You, How Compassion and Connection Save Lives. If you learn about what compassion really is, it's not being a pushover. If we talk about some people are so quick to not want to implement self-compassion. They feel like it's this trendy word. Well, if you understand what compassion isn't saying you're perfect, you're doing a great job, you're incredible. No, self-compassion is relating to yourself kindly in moments of failure. It's humanizing it of this is a normal human experience to fail. It's not saying you did it right. And I feel like that's the difference. Sometimes we get that mixed up in this new generation of that compassion is getting away with everything. No. It's just being human about it.
Right. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
If you ever have, if you feel like you have too much compassion for people, in my mind, it's changed to something else. It's no longer compassion, because compassion is you want to do what's good for people. That's not good for those kids to learn those work habits. That's not good for them long term.
Yeah, I think it's always important to hire slow and fire fast. For me as a strategic coach and help, I always want to help. It's like, oh, I can help, I can guide them, but you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, right? And so sometimes I've had to learn over the years that sometimes, again, it comes back, coach to standard. Most of the reason if I had turnover in my company, it was usually because I set a poor example of poor expectations. So I delegated without details. I said, okay, here's the job, Julie. You're supposed to do X, Y, and Z, but I didn't create that two-way communication for you to clarify. Then you'd go work your butt off. Then you'd come back and you'd show it to me, and I'd be like, what the hell is this? This isn't even what I asked for. And so then there would be this disdain. And so I had to learn that, and it's something I still struggle with, which is setting clear expectations, giving all the details, and creating that trust environment where people feel comfortable pushing back. And now I've got a great team that pushes back. So if I come up with a new idea, which I come up with every 30 seconds, my team now says, okay, Ford, you just came up with a new idea. Which one of these other 9 things do you want me to get rid of to replace this with? And a lot of times it's like, oh, I never mind. Just put that in the parking lot. We're going to focus on these 8. And sometimes it's okay, get rid of number 5 and let's put this in there. So that having good people that are clear on how to communicate with me, because I'm real direct. Like, you don't need to like set everything up. You can just come right out and rip the Band-Aid off with me. Now I know that not everybody's style is the same, but I have put all my employees through emotional intelligence and personality styles. So and I've sent them all my report too, because I want them to know, I believe my personality profile actually says Ford believes in win-win. If he can't get win-win, he's okay with win-lose. And it's like, it's not that I'm okay with win-lose, but at some point I'm willing to go, okay, I'll take responsibility. And that's a lesson I live method I live my life by, which is I accept responsibility for everything in my life, my actions, my inactions, my performance, and my results. So regardless of what it is, whether it's personal health or relationships or business, at the end of the day, I have learned to take personal accountability. And sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow, because even if my team doesn't perform, then I have to ask myself, okay, what factor did I have in that? Did I set clear expectations? And typically it comes down to, I didn't. I delegated and I asked for something and they didn't do it and I wasn't clear. So that's been a challenge for me. Now, I know everybody listening to this, we are live right now on the Business Growth Show audio podcast. We're live on multiple platform streaming. And if you're listening to this, you can check Julie out at julieleespeaks.com. And her book, again, say the title of your book.
I See You, How Compassion and Connection Save Lives.
I think that's really cool. So, okay, so we talked about the being seen. What was the second variable that you had?
Appreciated.
What are some things that organizations can do to help their teams feel appreciated? I'm curious.
Oh man, just highlighting good work. I mean, it's a simple one. Sometimes it's these simple things we figured out. Saying thank you and using people's first name. Huge. Have you ever watched a brain scan when you say people's name? It lights up like a Christmas tree. When you give me making compliments specific, when you give me specific compliments, don't just say thank you. I mean, that's a start, right? That's level 1.
Right.
Give me specific comments. Julie, I so appreciate how you went to bat for me in that meeting, right? Gave a compliment, you made it specific, and you used my name. My brain is like, I'm so happy, right? Like, and there's something about gratitude. It's magic. If you look at any popular religion or thought leadership, you go look at any of those popular things, almost every single one of them, I haven't found one that doesn't, teaches some element of gratitude, because gratitude is magic for the brain. And so that's why I always say gratitude begets momentum. When people feel appreciated, there's a healing that starts going on, and it starts pushing them to move forward at faster. So we want peak potential, making people feel appreciated. They want to do better. It's interesting the way I learned this, kind of a roundabout way, right? I didn't learn this in the corporate world for myself. I learned it through, quite frankly, like PTSD therapy, with different things I had to do to overcome some childhood things. But I learned about healing my brain when I started saying the phrase, "This is a perfect moment." So I'm like in my early 20s, and the therapist says to me, whenever I was really tough place in life, really, really debilitating anxiety and depression and dealing with a lot of things. And I remember the therapist saying, like, I don't care if you're feeling anxious and depressed, which feels rude, first of all, a kind of a mean thing to say, right?
Right.
And but she's like, when you have a moment, it's turning the key ignition and your favorite song comes on and you just have that moment where you're like, ding. She's like, I just want you to say in your mind, this is a perfect moment. That's all I want you to do. And then if you feel depressed and anxious a second later, great, I don't care. So I started to do it, and it was crazy how fast the gap between the perfect moments got smaller and smaller and smaller, because our brain starts looking for it. That's how appreciation works. When we start voicing gratitude, when we start recognizing gratitude, our brain just starts looking for it everywhere. All of a sudden, that's our default. And it happens fast. We're truly healing and creating new ruts. Like if we think about our brain as a highway, we're creating a new highway path of,
new neural pathway.
now a new neural pathway, exactly, of exactly where my brain is triggered to go in a new situation. It's looking for appreciation. So you look at that, you can take that as far as, I always talk about seeing people not in black and white and not just in color, but the highest level is in high definition, seeing people in high definition, which is a default to not just see them in absolutes, good or bad. I know I'm doing a crash course in this, but
No, it's good.
black and white,
This is what this
seeing in
episode's about.
absolutes. Yeah, straightforward, direct, right? We're not going to mess around, but black and white thinking. We see people in absolutes. Good, bad, wrong, right, stupid, unmotivated, motivated, high performer, low performer, whatever. Very absolute thinking. I mean, I think as kids, especially, we do that. My kids are always asking, is it a good guy or bad guy? And it's like, we don't have the understanding, the development to understand nuance around situations. So most people aren't all good or bad, right? And then it's like, as we develop and we get to know people, we move in a little closer situation. That's where we start, oh, I'm starting to connect, right? I'm starting to connect, which there's another C word that almost always follows connection, which is compassion. I'm starting to feel some compassion for your story, what makes you you. Okay, now I'm seeing in color, right? We talk about the history of TV. We go to black and white television. When you don't know color exists, black and white works. Like, it works to just like be like, they're a jerk, they're the best. Like, it's fun. It's fun to be right and to just, everything's in absolutes. It's enjoyable, right? You look at politics right now and we could have a whole conversation about
Yeah, it's
the
crazy.
black and white thinking there, right? It's not sexy to be in the middle and be like, well, it's complicated. Like, that's not what's going to make headlines, right? But if we want to see in reality, start seeing people in color. And then 1998, TV didn't stop with color television. We get to high definition, right? Talk about realistic. Now we're really seeing people. We're seeing the screen. It feels like they're like in the room with us. I don't even like always watching things in HD because it's so
Yeah, it's so
real.
Chris. Yeah, it's wild.
It's kind of unnerving almost. And that's where, for me, high definition is that we start to see people default by seeing them for their strengths, what they have to add. And it's not even a choice we're making. It's that we have conditioned ourselves. When we meet people, we're automatically looking for, what does this person have that can help this situation, that can benefit the world at large? And so that wraps in really well with gratitude. You think that's part of creating those new neural pathways of just sharing specific appreciation using their names that can really benefit a company, its performance, and at the same time be improving the person's mental health.
I think that's great. And what was the final concept of the three?
I trust you.
Yeah, the trust.
We kind of went at that for a while because that's one of the ones, I'll be honest, I get the most pushback on, because leaders want to be like, well, maybe I'm just a giver and I don't want people to have to help me. I'm like, okay, but there's somewhere in you then that sees receiving help as a weakness. Therefore, I now know if I ask you for help, there's something about you that sees it, that I'm showing weakness as an employee, and that hurts our trust. Like, I'll talk to people all day about this. I'm like, I've researched this. You want to go look at The Anatomy of Trust by Brene Brown and look at some of this. Anyways, it's fascinating. The people, and I think if all of us, we just stop and think, who are the people in my life that I'm most likely to call at 2 a.m. when I'm stuck in the airport? I'm calling the people that have asked me to do the same for them, that I know are open to that. They need help too. They're human too. I'm not calling the person I don't relate to, that I don't know if they have a personality, because they're just about work, right? Like, there's got to be some humanness there and some trust that I let you in my story and you let me in mine.
Well,
with boundaries, right, Ford?
Yeah, of course.
Not being that doesn't mean being a pushover. Like, one doesn't equal the other.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I think that what I've learned in organizations is, and I've worked with a lot of teams as a strategic advisor to their company to help them grow. And the first place I start is, a tech stack review. I look at their marketing, I look at their sales, I look at their operations, and I look at their culture. And culture is always complicated, Julie, because it's culture, communication, it's dealing with change, it's communication, it's team building and leadership and management. So there's a lot of different modalities related to that. And running a business requires all different skill sets. And the human connection that we've been talking about today in this episode is so important. And especially since AI is going to impact, I really believe it's a sentient being that's landed. It's a new species. It's got a brain and mind of its own. It can now reason. It can now do deductive listening. It's no longer just regurgitating, fancy autocomplete on steroids. It actually can do a lot of reasoning now. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of changes in human behavior going forward. And I think it's going to make the human connection and how we treat people and how we communicate face to face, eye to eye, toe to toe, even more valuable. I mean, me as a keynote speaker, I go to a lot of conferences around the globe, and I'm brought in for business growth. And, what the difference is people say, well, AI is going to replace, there's no reason to go to conferences anymore when you can learn everything online and you can do everything online. Well, I think it's the exact opposite. I think that people are going to crave even more. I
Yes.
mean, my wife's a Pilates instructor, and she teaches other instructors and has studios and things. And what I've learned is I've tried to convince her, she's not there yet, but she's done a lot of public events. And I said, look, she needs to do the disconnected retreat where people come and they put their phones in a Faraday bag or whatever, where they're not doing anything with technology for the weekend, other than, okay, they can have a staff monitor it if someone's kids need something. But I think that as technology increases, people are going to crave that human connection even more. And because but I think it might take a whole generation, because if you look at the studies of the millennials and the younger generations, if you look at how much time they spend with other people, and we're talking about post-pandemic too, but the amount of time that they spend not on screen with people has gone down significantly. I don't know the exact stats, but the research is out there, which means they're not learning the social skills, they're not learning the communication skills, and then they get into the workforce and they're not prepared because they haven't learned the social dynamics of being around people, or how to communicate, or how to go to a dinner, or how to sit with people, or how to just sit. I mean, for me, as I look out my window, I've got a lake view here in my office. There are some times where if I'm frustrated and I got email and flags and, podcast episodes to do or whatever, sometimes I just go outside and I look at the trees and I just think they don't care about anything. And I know for me, when I've gone on vacation, it takes me about 2 days to disconnect, and then I can actually enjoy it. But I find that I don't miss all these things that we think are super important. So I'm curious, as your closing thoughts, what would you share with our listeners on how they can be better prepared to take personal accountability for the human connections in their life?
What I'd share is, I think so often, especially post-COVID, we look at statistics post-COVID of people's mental health. 78% of people feel like the pandemic severely impacted their mental health. 53% report struggling with depression, 52% with anxiety, and 32% with PTSD. So what happened with COVID is a ton of isolation, right? Tons. Everything went virtual. There's a place for virtual. Yes, I don't think it's going away by any means. However, in the past, if we look backwards, how did people get through World War II? How do people get through these other things? Well, they hung stars in the window. They did these community efforts to stay. When we're together and we do things together, we're unstoppable. The problem that can happen with these things is when we create isolation. So is it a tool? Yes. Is it inherently evil to use, the incredible miracles of technology? Of course not. It's amazing. But if we use it to replace human connection, I think we are going to be hurting a lot. But I think there's hope. I think there's a ton of hope. That's why I do what I do. I wouldn't if I didn't believe there's hope. And it's because I experienced it firsthand for myself. The reason being, so often I think leaders can look at these statistics or hear these conversations specifically about mental health and ask this question. Well, is other people's happiness my business? Why is this in the workplace?
Right.
This is something at home. This is your personal life to deal with, right? And my thought there is, okay, so Stanford Medical has done research. What do they say lowers anxiety, depression, even suicide ideation? Higher social connection. That's it. That's what they say. That's their findings. So they're not saying happiness. And so I say, I'll ask them, is other people's happiness your business? And I'll get varying answers. And I'm like, no. Immediately, no, absolutely not. I can't even make myself be happy sometimes. You are not in charge of forcing other people to be happy. That's never been your role. It's not your role. If you want to be a fantastic leader that's connected and help people's mental health, happiness isn't your business. Connection is. Connection is your business. Connection is not always happy. When my sister died, there's pictures of me standing behind the casket of my sister, and I have my other sister around me. We take a picture, it's 3 of us, and there's always been 4 sisters. This is my best friend in the world I lost. I know I'm kind of jumping into something hard here, but I'll pull you out.
Go for it. I'm following you. This
is it. I'm standing behind the casket. People say, get a picture together as sisters. So I have one on one side, one on the other. My sister that I was closest to is in a casket in front of me. And in that moment, as they snap the picture, all I can think is, there's always been 4. There's supposed to be, why is there not 4? There's supposed to be 4. Like, we've never taken a picture, all the sisters, and there's just 3. And I just lose it. And if I could share a picture here, I would. But one of my cousins snapped a picture later, which I didn't see. And I'm kind of glad I didn't know. I think in the moment it might have disrupted a little bit. But both of my sisters, as I start to collapse, they just turn and they just grab me from either side. And I've just lost it completely. And I think you look at that picture, and for me, that sends it home of, it is not their business to try to make me happy in that moment. Like, that'd be crazy. I've just lost my best friend. But what can they do? They can connect. When we look at business and we look at what can we do for our people, you don't have to carry that burden that you need to make them happy, that's your job. No. Connection, human connection, that's the buffer that gets people through challenging times at work. That's when we go over speed bumps, that's the, oh man, I wish I knew car better. What do we call that? The suspension.
The shock,
that's the suspension, that the shock that makes the bump feel less volatile, less jerking, is that human connection piece is in place, that we can handle that. We can handle a little bit of upheaval at work. We can handle some failures. We can handle that because that suspension is in place.
Well, Julie Lee, I want to thank you personally for all the great insights, especially the takeaway that resonated with me today is, it's not my responsibility to make them happy. It's my responsibility to show up, to see them, to provide gratitude, and to create a culture of trust. Would you agree?
Absolutely. A+.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And this has been Fortify Live.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Fortify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.